Aloha and welcome back. This is going to be Dr. Phil talking to Dr. Omekongo about DEI and whether it's good or bad, all that business.
Next, a professor and author who says it doesn't matter how you got into school, whether it was through affirmative action or your dad's name on a building. Everyone takes the same test to get out, no matter how you got in. We'll hear from him after the break. My next guest, Dr. Dibinga, is a senior professional lecturer with focus on peace, human rights, and cultural relations at American University, D.C., and the author of Lies About Black People: How to Combat Racist Stereotypes and Why It Matters. Now, he could not disagree more with Daniel and Betsy.
I guess we can't teach why Native Americans shed tears on that trail. I guess we can't teach why Japanese Americans were interned in those camps in jail. I guess we can't teach why Jews fleeing the Holocaust came to America and were forced to reverse sail. I guess we can't teach about those who had their rights stalled at Stonewall as they cried and wailed. Too many in America caught up in ignorance and denial. They'd rather have you forget history to learn about its tribulations and trials. They'd rather not teach you the history so white folks don't feel guilty. They think white kids will only see themselves as evil and filthy. But I digress, because my faith in white students is stronger than yours. I know they can handle full history and all of its flaws. They can learn the evils of some white people because those evils were defeated. And when we teach them the history, they're inspired to never repeat it. I know that white kids aged 16 to 19 can handle 16-19, even white kids in elementary and preteens, because too many students get angry when they find out the truth about America's complete history that wasn't taught in their youth.
I remember I got mad when I started learning about some real history and whatnot.
Worst breakfast for your waistline.
Oatmeal.
They're one of the best ways I've found.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight. Now,
It's an honor.
From your own personal experience, can you tell us why you think DEI is so important and works?
Well, the great activist Julian Bond said that you take the word America and you flip the letters around, you can spell out the term I am race. There's nothing that has happened in America that race has not been a part of. Whether we're talking about housing, whether we're talking about jobs, whether we're talking about corporate access, whether we're talking about the healthcare system, which Dr. King said was probably the most racist aspect of American society, everything has been based on race. If you go back into the day and you look at other groups of diverse backgrounds, we used to use very ignorant terms like yellow to describe Asian people, red to describe Native American people. Over the years, we flipped that, started talking about Asian American and Native Americans, indigenous people. But if you notice, we kept white and black. Because the problem with whiteness is that whiteness is an idea. It's not about white people, it's about the idea of whiteness, just as the idea of blackness is a problem. And so we kept those on the books. We changed categories of whiteness over the years in order to expand whiteness. And so we have to understand that this country has always been about the complexion of connection, and it has always served to deny people opportunities based on their race. And so diversity is about what Dr. King said. He said it's about true integration is about the inclusion of power, resources, and responsibility. So it's not just about the numbers you have in your organization, it's about what's the power that they have. And that's why DEI programs work. I see that at the corporations that I speak at, I see it at the schools that I speak at, I see it at the government groups that I speak at. And this idea that...
But how did they get there? They didn't get there through a DEI program, and they don't define diversity based on skin color.
I would disagree with that. Diversity is not just about race. There's diversity of thought, there's religion, class, physical ability, which is the largest quote-unquote minority group in this country is the disabled population, who's also not represented on many of the campuses that I go to. But we get stuck on this concept of race because it has this fundamental beef between white and black. And people ultimately don't want to give up whiteness. If you look at Jane Elliott, a white scholar who was fired from school for the blue-eyed, brown-eyed test, she asked the audience of white people, how many of y'all be willing to give up being white? And none of them raised their hand. And she said, well, it's because you know that being white makes you automatically be treated better than black people, and you're not doing anything about it. That's where the problem lies. Are we going to continue to build an America where everybody can be celebrated or tolerated? That's what it really comes down to.
Let me ask you a question. This is an observation that Thomas Sowell made that I'm just curious if you agree with.
And then every right winger that wants to bring up a point about any of this, DEI or money, always brings up Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell, he doesn't care about nobody. He is, I do not like Thomas Sowell. There's a few videos out there. Thomas Sowell doesn't know anything about economics or something like that. But man, they always bring up Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell, Thomas Sowell. He is the original Sambo, man. Like, I can't stand Thomas Sowell.
That the free market provides a clear incentive not to discriminate according to race.
This market isn't free.
That's not what I asked you.
I disagree with what he said.
I disagree totally
I would
too.
agree if you actually had a free market, which we do not in the United States. Because free
He's going to talk about a free market would not have racism because you'd hire black people over less qualified white people. The entirety of our nation is hiring white people over black people no matter what. It's hiring your brother over people who are more qualified. That is what there's no meritocracy in the U.S. There's never been a meritocracy in the U.S. That is insane to even say something like that.
free means everybody has access to it. Everybody has access to the same resources. We live in a society where we fund our schools based off of taxpayers' dollars. So the poorest
So I wanna
schools get
relive
the
what he
poorest
just said.
resource because you know that being white makes you automatically be treated
Not
better
this
than black
part.
people, and you're not doing anything about it. That's where the problem lies. Are we going to continue to build an America where everybody can be celebrated or tolerated? That's what it really comes down to.
Let me ask you a question. This is an observation that Thomas Sowell made that I'm just curious if you agree with. That the free market provides a clear incentive not to discriminate according to race.
This market isn't free.
That's not what I asked you.
I disagree with what he said. I would agree if you actually had a free market, which we do not in the United States. Because free means everybody has access to it. Everybody has access to the same resources. We live in a
Access to
society
the
where we
same
fund our
resources.
schools based off
Access
of
to the same
taxpayers'
resources.
dollars. So the poorest schools get the poorest resources. The rich
There you go. Poorest schools get the poorest resources because we base our schools on, what is it, property tax, right? So if you live in a poorer place, you have lower property tax. A richer place, more property tax, better schools.
richer schools get the best resources. What's free about that? We continue to create a cycle of poverty.
But his point is that if you're racist and you hire whites that are not as productive, intelligent, and sharp because you don't want to hire a black candidate who is smart, sharp, productive, in the long run, they're not going to be competitive and they're going to lose out.
That's
But is
not
that
true.
not the history of America? I mean, this was a country that at one point had a sign saying no blacks or Irish need apply because Irish people were not considered part of whiteness, right? And so look at Wall Street. I mean, there's a history of people only choosing to employ white people. And that's why in a society that's browning, in a world that's becoming smaller, the ability to compete is not there. And so my thing is for people who feel threatened because they've always had access to everything from black women's bodies to the companies and the organizations and the places that they lived and occupied, equality is going to look like oppression.
All right. I have to take the opportunity for a break. This is an equal opportunity break. We'll be right back. I'm very pragmatic about these things. I don't think DEI works. I don't think it matters how anybody feels about it. Statistically, based on empirical data and research, it doesn't work.
Well, it depends on what works means. Like, what is the point of DEI? To give more people access to jobs, higher jobs, and whatnot. If that's the goal, then that's happening. You get more access to higher jobs. You get to be a CEO or fly planes or this and that. But when you fly the plane, you still have to take the class, right? You don't just go, oh, here, you're black, go fly a plane. That's not the way it works. But people were denied just because they were black that they couldn't do a lot of things, before, and now they're making sure to include more people. That's what it's for, so that means it works in what it's meant to do.
We can't create equality of outcome.
Nobody
Problem
wants
is-
equality of outcome. I hate that they always say that. So if you'll notice, the Democrats and the Republicans, they'll both do this, or they'll say something that the left wants or that the other side wants that they never said. That no one wants equality of outcome. If you have a son and a daughter, you don't want equality of outcome, right? You want your daughter to get married to a man and your son to get married to a woman, probably. if there's other options, right? But I mean, in the most part, you want certain things. If you have a son that's 5'1" and a son that's 6'1", you might play different sports, right? You might do different things. Nobody wants equality of outcome. That's so. You have 5 kids. Some are good at math. Some are good at English or whatever language. Some are good at a bunch of languages, right? And some are good at cooking or whatever. They're not all going to be good at the same thing. They're not all going to get the same job. Nobody wants equality of outcome. I hate that they say that.
Is when you put DEI aside, then you're counting on creating equal opportunity for everyone, and that's the problem.
Wait, that's
There's
what we
not
want
e-
is equal opportunity. How is equal opportunity a problem?
Equal opportunity for everyone. We have so many overrepresented in the Black community that are starting way behind because the tax base in the areas that so many live is much lower. And so
that's what Dr. Omekongo brought up, right? Property tax is what funds schools, and that's not what it should be, because we went over this just now, but the higher property tax, the better schools, and the more poor you are, you're going to pay lower property tax and have less funded schools.
the schools just simply don't have the money to resource the classrooms, to even keep the buildings up, to even keep the windows with glass in them sometimes.
Go ahead, Dr. Phil.
So you're not preparing those students. It's hard to get teachers to want to work in those areas. So they don't have the opportunity. And
Okay.
what I'm saying is you can make a huge dent in this in one generation
How's that?
if you will go into those areas and fund those schools, get the
Okay.
teachers into those areas,
Yeah.
and give those kids the opportunity to get the base that they need academically, so you don't have to have a quota system, so you don't have to lower standards, so you don't have to compromise in putting them into the schools they deserve to have just as much access to as anybody else. And I think you can make a huge dent in the disparity of opportunity if you go into those communities and you make sure that they have the computers, the Wi-Fi, the buildings, the teachers, the facilities, so they have the same opportunity that every other kid has.
So yes, I've said this before, we shouldn't use property tax for funding schools. We should just have a tax, whatever, and it's all throughout the U.S., and it's just however much it is divided out. That's how much schools get divided out. Every school gets the same amount. But every school should be like the best school that there is. Every school should have a computer per kid. Every school should have a pool at it, unless you live like maybe in North Dakota or something. There's no point having a pool. But indoor pools in those kind of places, right? If you live in a cold place, you have indoor pools. But you should have fields, courts, all that stuff. Like, nobody wants equality of outcome. We want equality of access, and that's exactly what he is explaining right here. His solution is the left solution, equality of access. Nobody wants equality of outcome, because again, you're going to have however many people at the school. You got 100 people, you're going to have 100 different outcomes. And anybody with a brain understands that if you got 1,000 people, you're going to have 1,000 different outcomes. Some will be similar, but most will be different.
And I think if you do that, in one generation, you can make a huge dent in leveling the playing field. But there's got to be one other aspect.
What is
to
that,
it,
Dr. Phil?
Is you've got to get to the parents.
What are you going to do with the parents?
Who came from a generation before, and get them to value and support education as well. So it means that we also have to deal with the home situation and make sure that they have Wi-Fi, that they have the computers there, that they have parents that are oriented to supporting the academic endeavors. But if focus and emphasis is put on that, you can go a long way to getting those young people prepared to be competitive in those environments. And I'm not saying it's the whole solution, but I think it would go a long way to giving those kids the opportunities that they deserve and level the playing field.
I love it. I love it. Dr. Phil wants to bring DEI to the kids rather than the parents, but then he wants to bring a little DEI to the parents once he brings it to the kids to make sure their homes have the stuff they need for the kids, right? So what he wants to do is pay attention to race for schools and children and catch those up to the rich kids or white kids or whatever. He didn't say just the better schools, right? Make the lower income schools caught up to the higher income schools. I'm all for it. It's wonderful. So we got to combine our taxes, not use property tax anymore. But it's still, we got to also help the parents value education, right? So if we want the parents to value education, we got to go to the homes, talk to them, make sure they have Wi-Fi, all this stuff. But then also, we're probably going to need to help them get jobs a little bit so that they can pay for their kids. Well, if the education is going to be more free, we still got to buy clothes. We still got to pay for like sporting events, things like that. We got to buy food, extracurricular books and games, just living life, right? You know. So Dr. Phil wants to take DEI out of stuff while putting DEI in his own way, which, okay, you guys just don't like the term DEI. Get over it. There's just words and terms. That's what stuff is. I'm bald. He's bald. That's just the name of the word. It means you don't have hair on the top of your head, right? Like, whatever. But DEI, call it DEI, call it, what's the other one? Oh, man, when they used to hire people, I forget. But whatever you want to call it, who cares? We need to help people who don't have money. And so you take DEI out of it, you just call it low-income schools. Now you think about trailer parks and poor white people too. Fine. Everybody needs help, right? Anybody who's poor needs help. It doesn't matter the terms. It just matters that people get help. But that's great, Dr. Phil. I love the idea. I've said it. He's probably a little more eloquent than I am. But yes, perfect. Let's fund these poor schools and get these kids everything that they need. We come here. We come to where there's low-income kids. We go to IHS where there's homeless kids. We just take it to them.